Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RCD ShareNet. My name's Dave Thompson, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator here and ShareNet contributor. And we are going to talk about road safety, winter and fall safety for being outside, using the bus, using your car, using your bike, using your wheelchair, your walker, whatever it is. It's very important to make a sort of switch in your mind at the change in the colors that you start to change your sort of attitude. So we're all talking about the big thing is change. And we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Chen, who is a travel training. What exactly is your title, Chris?
So my title right now is the Manager of Access Transit Customer Care and Travel Training. So we support customers with diverse abilities to use our conventional transit system, but also the HandyDart system.
Okay, great. So Chris is going to sort of add the bus traveler's point of view to everything we're talking about today. And we'll get started. And like I said, the whole focus of this talk is about change. And the first change that I think you have to make is your change in your attitude and habits when the fall comes. So I know from a lifetime cycler that you have so much more in the summer. You've got more visibility a lot of times. You've got all those little things like on the road, and you can just take shortcuts and things like that. You can't do that in the winter. So I think you have to try to remind yourself somehow to make that change. Do you agree?
Yes, I definitely agree.
And I've come up with a couple of ideas for that. And because being someone who has had to reduce my stress, because I basically, with my illness, I'm allergic to stress. So there's things that you can do. Like I know that there's some of the intersections around Richmond, you'll see signs that say high crass area or something like that. So I always kind of move my bike a couple feet back.
Yep.
When I see those signs, because it's a high, I know there's been a lot of accidents there. So if you look out for those, that's a good thing. That one just came into my mind. But take a breath before you step out onto the street, and maybe, or, I put in my head, figure out a big long word. Like when I do sound checks for this, I always say Mississippi or Alpha or some long word. Say that to yourself before you make that step. And that might give you just enough time to avoid that car that is slipping on the wet leaves or whatnot else, or the bus or whatever, right? So if you can sort of get that practice, it's kind of easy. You just, sort of say, okay, one, or maybe even a countdown or something, right?
Yeah, and one tip that I might have is, I think a lot of people would want to be the first one to step onto the crosswalk as soon as the light turns. Give it a second, because there might always be somebody that might not be paying attention. They might be doing, they thought they might have enough time to do a quick turn. That is the most dangerous part, and that tends to be when the accidents happen. So one thing I train my when I try to train my kids to cross the street is that, first of all, we don't stand next to the ledge of the sidewalk when we're waiting for the light. And when the light turns, wait a second, look around,
right.
And when you feel that it's clear, that's when you cross. Now, with that said, crosswalks, sometimes the lights are relatively short, so you have to take that into account as well. But never rush yourself into a situation where you didn't look and you just go, because that's when accidents happen.
Because you just get used to the fact, oh, they're supposed to be stopping. Well, that's in a perfect world, right? It's not
Yeah,
always a perfect
I
world.
think assumptions doesn't really work that way. That's why they call them
Yep,
accidents.
exactly, right. And especially with and when the rain comes, and a lot of times people do that sort of mindset where they've got the umbrellas that's blocking their view. They want to be out, not in the rain, as short period of time as possible, so that causes them to rush too. and
Yeah.
and and sort of, just changing that mindset. It's like, give yourself that little extra time so you're not doing those I cut them, cutting corners. You're not doing that. You
Yeah.
have enough time. You don't have to rush. You've got an umbrella. It's just water. Like I say that when I tell people that I ride all year round, they go, "How can you do that?" I go, "If you can't be wet for 20 minutes in Vancouver, move to Phoenix or somewhere else."
That is very true. We do live in an area that you kind of expect it to be rained on.
Right?
So,
And if you really got to sort of change your thought process if you can't be wet for
mhm.
20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So, and then of course it's to be visible in those spots. And I mean, like cutting corners, a lot of times in the summer, I have problems too with the vegetation growing high and they're
Mhm.
blocking crosswalks and things like that. So think
Yeah.
about those things too. If you're cutting corners or taking a shortcut, you're coming out of an angle or somewhere where someone's not used to you coming out of. And then all of a sudden you're there, right?
Yeah, and I also want to add it's not just corners. Sometimes it's also driveways,
Mhm.
because and that's the part of the assumption plus the visibility. A lot of people assume that we're walking on the sidewalk, we have the right of way. They they wouldn't dare to
Mhm.
hit us with a car, but they don't intend to.
No.
A lot of times it's because they didn't see, because there's something blocking their way. So visibility, like making yourself visible, but also assume other people might not be able to see you,
Yeah.
and that's how you make sure that you are safe in that front.
Yeah. And like because I've been riding for so long and because I have such a large bike, I will come up behind people and I'll see them on their cell phones and I'll be watching them weaving like this. And so I'll ring my bell and they'll look at me like I'm offending. Like, how did you know I was going to do
Hmm.
that? Hey, I've been watching you for 5 minutes and you've been all over the place.
Yeah,
I am not taking the chance of passing you now. Right.
yeah.
And that has probably saved me from a lot of a lot of accidents because of that. But I get some really, hey, what do you mean? I'm not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, but the bell is also a way to get visibility, right?
Yep.
It's like
Yep.
drawing attention to yourself. So that
Yeah.
way, it's making them aware. I'm here.
Yeah. And we're going to sort of talk about that in the second part as well. Is the stuff we can carry our
Mhm.
gear.
Yeah.
So as you can notice, I'm probably annoying people with my large pumpkin jacket today, as my son calls it. He says, just put on a green hat and you can go as a pumpkin for Halloween. But I bought this a couple years ago and it's great. I wear it in the winter. So
Mhm.
and the winter's depressing, right? And so it's always like if I always put on the brightest clothes when I'm in the worst mood, right?
Yeah.
So if you kind of use that same sort of reminder, is the darker the day, the brighter your clothes should be, sort of. And just
Yeah.
because I have come out on the street, there's a kid in my neighborhood who is dark skinned. He rides a dark bike. He is all in black. He has come out and scared the living daylights out of me sometimes. And I wonder, how do you purposely go outside like that without even accidentally having some color on somewhere, you know?
It takes a special effort to look cool
Yeah.
that way,
Did you
but
try to be totally black?
yeah, but I think part of it is, and no, and you're absolutely right, is that maybe in the summertime that would totally be fine because it's bright outside, everybody is more attentive, there's no rain to distract us and things like that. But in wintertime, when you look outside right now, it's 2:30 in the afternoon and it's already gray,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's when if you wear black clothes or gray clothes or dark colored clothes, it kind of blends in.
So yeah, try to get those. There's lots of times now. We have pictures. We'll have pictures coming up of some of the equipment that you can get. There's the RCMP put out a great little visible thing that snaps onto your wrist, and you can get those lots of places. We are going to have some of that stuff at our front desk, and you'll be able to ask for it if you'd like and come by. There's also flashing lights. DoorDash has a flashing light right now for joggers. And there is one from Transit that I've been trying to find that I've been using. I've been putting it on my dog.
Yeah, and a few cities have them too.
Yeah.
A few cities have the yellow or the red ones that has a flashing light inside, and you could clip it onto your zipper.
And I
So
think
those ones are
ICBC
actually quite.
has some reflectors as well that they pass out. So there's
That's
places
right.
to sort of get that. If I have that information, I can always put it on our sites and whatnot else. But there is even the dollar store, you can buy cheap little lights, and that way, if you forget that it's in one pocket, then it's not that expensive. Throw
Yeah.
one in every jacket and then it's there, right? And you don't have to worry about it. And I have ones for my dog that because even though he's a white dog, we got him on Halloween, and I couldn't see a single thing. And especially if
Yeah.
you have a long leash with your dog, he's 7 feet away. So that
Yeah.
makes a difference in cars with some of those long leashes, the expandable ones. They could be 10
Hmm.
feet away from the person when you're
Yeah.
walking, and that makes a huge difference, right? So
Yeah.
put a light on your dog.
And I guess with Halloween coming up, that might be even more so. Some of our viewers today might want to go out in costumes and things like that. When I in previous years, when I take my kids out for Halloween, I get them glow sticks and things like that, attached to the goodie bag that they get. They basically, it turns their very dark colored costume into something really bright,
Mhm.
and that way they can travel safely.
Yeah. And so there's lots of fun ways of doing it that does it. It's not a big clunky light or anything like that. And a lot of them can clip on zippers and things. So it's great. And you can buy really cheap high vis vests at the dollar store too. I've had those in the past for my bike. I've just tied them on the end of my bike or whatever. So there's lots of ways to have something sort of accessible at all times.
Mhm.
So the second change there is definitely change your clothing and your gear. So that's definitely. Now, the third change is not really you changing it, it's about being recognizing the changes outside, right?
Mhm.
So what is happening with the weather that you're going out into? So you got to be prepared with your gear. You got to and it's all sort of a domino effect. If you don't get the right boots there, then you're going to be worried about getting your feet wet, and that's going to make you rush more, and that's going to make you jump over the puddles, and that's going to put you in danger, right? So it all starts with get the right gear, and then you're not cutting that corner, right?
Yeah.
And so have those nice bright. I just bought new rain boots, bright yellow, right?
Yeah.
Great. I've got my feet. I've got something that's going to be bright all the time, and I don't have to rush. I don't have to worry if I'm stuck. I've got people on both sides of me, and I have to walk through the puddle. I'll walk through the puddle, and then when it comes to puddles and whatnot else, you also got to be prepared with what's under. You don't know, right? These
Yeah.
could be deep, there could be rocks, especially for a bike rider or someone with a walker or a wheelchair. You got to be really sort of careful because you can't really
Mhm.
see, especially if the thing's full of leaves too, right?
Yeah, and the reality is we live in the city where sometimes traffic can change. We might anticipate that we will be out in the weather for 5 minutes. It could turn into 10, it could turn into 20, it could turn into half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that you're just walking and there's a detour, then you have to walk longer, or it could be that you're waiting for a bus or somebody to pick you up, but because of traffic, you're stuck waiting a little bit longer. So I think precisely right, getting the right gear, well, weather boots, and wear extra layer of clothing, and if possible, if you can, in a backpack. You might not need it right now, but you might need it later in the day because
Mm-hmm.
the weather change. So it's precisely being prepared for the change. That's the key.
Because that way you don't fall into that habit of trying to cut those corners and stuff. You're like, okay, well, no
Exactly.
big deal, I'm fine, right?
Mhm.
And so some of those sort of things that I see as a bike rider is like the leaves piled up in the corners when they clog the drains. I've actually
Yes.
gotten off my bike before with a stick and unplugged drains with leaves before, because now there's like this massive puddle because the drain is plugged, and
Hmm.
you can't really tell what's going to happen. There
Yeah.
could be rocks, there could be all kinds of things in there, right? So you have to really be careful with that, especially from a wheelchair standpoint or whatnot else. It could knock you off balance for sure. I've been flipped over because I haven't seen a dip in something, and
Yeah.
so that's something you got to watch out for. Um, you know, obviously snow, if we get snow and whatnot else,
Mhm.
that's a biggie, and that's pretty, again, that's the same thing. It can cover up stuff that you don't know is there.
Mhm.
So, my rule is, if like I have a huge bike and I can run over things, but I try to avoid it because it could have something else in it, like a box. You think it's just a box, but it
Yeah.
could have something hard in it. You don't know, right?
Yeah, and also sometimes it's walking by those hazards that can be a
Mhm.
problem too. Like for example, if you're walking on the sidewalk, but next to it there's a big puddle on the road. There might be no cars when you're approaching it, but all of a sudden a car come up. They didn't even. It's not that they intentionally splash you, but they didn't see the puddle,
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
drove right by and splash all over you. And
and
that gets you all cold and wet, and
right.
that's not a
And
good.
nowadays, with COVID, people are walking more on the streets because they're trying to do that space thing. And which
Yeah.
scares me. There's a man in my neighborhood who will walk on the street all the time. He never wears anything bright. He walks against the traffic. I'm like, you're going
Yeah.
to get yourself killed.
Well, I can't speak for that gentleman, but I encourage everybody to yes, maintain social distancing, but also try to stay onto the pedestrian or walkways as much as they can. Now, if needed, maybe on the grass and things like that, and that would be better than going onto the road because
Yeah.
precisely road there sometimes there's always cars. But I think it's also changing the habit. Um, is realizing that the reality is there are more people walking now, and that's a good thing
Mhm.
because it's a healthier choice. But it's also being aware that that might happen. So it's maybe finding a time that might be less crowded. Like going in different times. If you let's say you're just walking around your neighborhood, but you notice every day around 4 or 5 o'clock, like it's kind
Yeah.
of like
Just
the Highway 1 there,
avoid that. Yeah.
avoid that hour. Maybe a little bit, well, maybe a little bit later, maybe a little bit earlier. There are
Right.
always different options.
So, what about, I know with the bus, you do have, there's definitely, you will see people that, Bob Newhart, who is an old comedian, does a thing about how bus drivers have, these tendencies that they do, that was like, that they'll make you run for us, to say, don't go half speed, because those old ladies, they have a second burst, they can run and catch the bus. But we've seen people have terrible accidents because they're running for a bus and they
Mhm.
fall, right? And
Yeah, yeah. So I think with transit, it definitely has changed a little bit. And some of the things that we're trying to remind our passengers is that give yourself a little bit more time. Again, it's changing that mentality. Um, and it's not really changing all that much because if you really think about it, the reality has been you wait for the bus and the bus doesn't wait for you. And ultimately is if and we have many tools that you could find out when the bus is going to show up at the bus stop.
yeah, that's what I was going to mention, because my son uses those a lot, the texting
Hmm.
and all that stuff.
But I think it's also a good reminder that those tools are estimation. You do not take them as a Bible because if the text tell you that the bus is going to show up at 5 o'clock, it might show up at 4:59, and you don't want to be get there at 5 o'clock and the bus is just pulling away. So always give yourself 5 to 10 minutes a little bit earlier, and especially during COVID, especially if you want to maintain a little bit more social distancing, just in case. It depends on your comfort level. Uh, if you just time yourself to the exact bus you want to get, it might be that bus is full,
Right. And
and
then,
that
yeah, because
that
you
might
might,
become a problem. So
especially if
yeah,
it's
so
a high
always
traffic area, right? Or time.
exactly. So always give yourself a little bit more time and also just because you see a bus there, please fight the temptation to run behind the bus or to run across the street
Right.
to catch the bus
Yeah.
because that's when usually the accidents happen.
And that's when you need to sort of have that, give your head a shake and go, it's only a bus. 10 minutes, there's going to be another one. And that sort of mindfulness, really, of,
That's right.
what is this, what exactly are you putting yourself into for the reward? I can catch the bus. I'm not late. I'm going home. And
Hmm.
so, people just need, and that's practice. It's easy to say, it's hindsight's 2020, and everybody does it, right? And cuts corners sometimes. But if you can, if that's when you put in that code, relax, you put that word in or that mantra and say, it's all right, I'm covered, it's no problem, right? And it could definitely save your life someday, right? So thank you very much for visiting us today, Chris. And again, we're just going to recap the big things that we were talking about today for road safety in winter and fall is to change your attitude and make sure that you don't expect the drivers to change theirs, because you will never win a battle with a car. Right? So change your attitude and habits when the fall changes and the winter and the rain comes. Change your clothing and your gear. Grab some lights, put them in your pockets, get a bright pair of socks and fancy bright boots or something, and change your gear. Make that conscious that, when you walk out the door, say, could someone see me, or something. Even put something on your door to remind you. What do you, and then make sure that you are adjusting to the changes that are going to happen outside. You don't walk out there and go, oh, I didn't know it was raining. Do you know how many ways you can find out what the weather is now? There should never be that happening to anybody, right? I didn't know it was raining. How did you know, right? I always say that to my wife. It's like, oh, I have to see the weather. You can look at it anytime you want. Why does it have to be right now? Right?
But that's the most up to date.
Yeah. So watch out for those changes that are going outside, and especially the extreme ones like the puddles and the flooding and the whatnot like that. And if there's a huge snowstorm or whatnot else, and the fact that we're not great in the snow here in general. So don't just act like it's a summer day when you go out there in those snows, because it's a big thing here, as opposed to if you lived in Ontario or Calgary or somewhere like that, right? So again, yes, thank you very much for visiting, and we're going to end today. So be safe outside, and if you would, we're going to have some reflectors and things like that at the front desk. You can always come by and ask for one. That said you've seen the show on ShareNet, and you saw some big bald guy with an orange jacket on and wanted something. And we will talk to you later. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dave.